Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the latest in TU Automotive's webinar series. This webinar is being run for the TU Automotive Detroit event. We'll have a few more details about that at the end, but it's hello from me. My name is Jamie. I'm a project director over here at TU Automotive. We're coming to you live from TU Automotive HQ in a very grey London today. The topic for today's webinar is 5G Vice President of North America Research and Development at Denso. So gentlemen, I'll hand it over to you to do a brief introduction and we'll get started with a few questions. So Chris, if you'd like to start with a quick intro to yourself and 5G Americas.
Yeah, thank you. It's an honor to be here at your webinar today. This is Chris Pearson. I'm president of a wireless industry association called 5G Americas. And just to kind of give you an idea of 5G Americas, we consider ourselves the voice of 5G and LTE for the Americas region. That would be North, Central, and South America. And we work in primarily three different areas. We work on what would be considered technical recommendations where we bring out the technologies that we think are best to come out to the marketplace and work with other associations around the world and companies. The other areas that we work in are regulatory affairs and regulatory policy. And finally, we do a lot of really education outreach with industry media and industry analysts to make sure that they understand really the pathway of the 3GPP family of technologies, which would be like LTE, LTE Advanced, LTE Advanced Pro, and all the way through 5G and beyond.
Fantastic. And Roger, if you'd like to give just a brief introduction to yourself as well.
I run our North American research and development organization, primarily focused on intelligent vehicles, and that involves subjects like connectivity, automation, automated driving, cybersecurity, and advanced software aspects of transportation. Denso itself is a global Tier 1 automotive supplier with about $40 billion in sales around the globe, including Asia, Americas, and Europe.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Okay, well, we'll get started with the first question. Chris, I'm going to pose this one to you first. We've had a lot of sort of queries about what exactly is 5G. So I guess the question is, Chris, what really is 5G? And also following on from that, how will it differ from LTE capabilities?
Oh, that's a great question. So 5G actually is really the next evolution and revolution on the pathway for the mobile broadband or mobile wireless technologies around the world. It's being developed at what's called the Third Generation Partnership Project, or 3GPP. And as far as what it differs, it actually is going to be really looking at faster download speeds of transferring data, lower latency, which would be quicker response times, and then actually it's also going to be looking at addressing all the requirements what would be considered not just Internet of Things but massive Internet of Things. So it's going to really have a real new architecture. Oftentimes when people think of 5G, they think about the headlines, which is the testing and the trials of what would be considered millimeter wave radio. Because that is something that's going to be important to the 5G story, but that is just one component. If you look at the use cases, there's really three families of use cases that 5G is going to be addressing, and that's how they're designing the standard. The first family of use cases is called the Enhanced Mobile Broadband family of use cases. The second use case family is called Ultra High Reliability and Low Latency Communications. And finally, that third family of use cases is the massive machine type communication. So really when you look at 5G, it's looking at being faster, more flexible and lower latency to address the various new families of use cases.
Okay, fantastic, Chris. And just on the back of that, just a very quick one, what do you see the timeline for the rollout of 5G being? When can we expect to see this going live?
Well, we see a lot of tests and trials going out, and then we even see announcements about launches that would be considered pre-standard. So, but if you look at the timeline of the third generation partnership project, they're looking at the first phase of or phase one, I should say, of 5G standards to be completed in mid-year 2018, and the second phase would be in December of 2019, and that second phase is what would be utilized, the total standard at that point, to be submitted to ITU for their IMT 2020 5G requirements proposal. So as far as the actual commercial standardized rollouts of the technology, it's going to be really a 2020 and beyond story, where you see kind of the explosion of commercial standardized rollouts and that huge commercial ecosystem that's ready to roll in 2020 and beyond.
Okay, fantastic. Just before I fire up the next question, just to remind our audience that you will be able to submit questions to Chris and Roger. You will have a chat tab. If you type your questions on there at the end of the webinar when we have time, we'll be able to submit them to Chris and Roger. But I'd like to turn this next question to Roger, and obviously we've had a great definition of what 5G is. But my question to you, Roger, is how do you see it impacting the auto tech space? And with that in mind, I'd also be keen to hear your thoughts on how it compares to other spectrums, I suppose specifically DSRC,
Sure.
when we think about its impact on auto tech, autonomy, and the connected car.
Sure. So as Chris described, if all these use cases that 5G is supposed to address actually get addressed by the requirements and the technology that's deployed, he talked about enhanced mobility, broadband, high availability, low latency, and massive kind of machine-to-machine. All that is relevant to the transportation space, and in particular, consumer automotive. Today, maybe we don't see as much, connectivity being used for transportation, and that may be because we don't have such, ubiquitous availability of broadband and low latency wireless access, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. But we have to envision what the future looks like. So not what 2017 proposes for us, but as Chris mentioned, 2020 and beyond, and how the transportation world may change. I mean, if you were part of transportation or even part of kind of the high-tech world, you've undoubtedly heard about the prolific benefits or advances that we've seen in terms of automated driving and automated transportation, all the way from just on a campus where there's just a people mover, or many of the traditional auto manufacturers have talked about fully automated driving in unlimited spaces. We've also heard people like Uber actually deploying automated driving. And so I think when you think about a future transportation system after 2020, it will be much different, and therefore I believe that there will be some connection between the 5G world of connectivity and this future transportation system. So to mention things about V2V or V2I or V2 everything, I think in general there will be more than one technology to do certain things. I mean, each air interface or technology deployment has its own features and weaknesses, and I think there's room for a number of different over-the-air protocols and use case system design to be used for transportation in different safety or enhanced mobility or even environmental preservation scenarios.
Okay, fantastic. Chris, I suppose the same question back to yourself. Is there anything you'd like to add to what Roger's just pointed out?
Yeah, I think if you look at just really adding on to what Roger said, if you say, where are we going as a connected society? That connected society is going to include your car, and in that car, you're going to have various forms of connectivity that are going to be needed. Some are going to deal with safety. Some are going to be with automated driving, which actually could include safety, depending on how good a driver you are. Also, it's going to include things like entertainment and if it's a road trip in your family. So when you start to think about the connected future and the connected society that we're in, the car, something that many of us are in because of our longer commutes and so forth, is a natural place for many of the technology evolutions that we're seeing. And it's not just really about 5G. I know this seminar, or excuse me, this webinar is about 5G, but it's also even about the improvements in the mobile wireless standard with LTE Advanced Pro and moving to 5G. And so, there's a real connected future with the car and mobile wireless technologies, and I do think it's really open as to how do we serve the connected society and the connected car, and there could be a myriad of choices and a myriad of solutions that can come together to serve that connected future in the best possible way.
Okay, fantastic. Interesting you mentioned there, Chris. Obviously, there's many other spectrums to talk about. Obviously, the focus of this is 5G. But our next question, personally, I find is quite an interesting one, so I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this. But the question is, how can car makers build vehicles that are designed on wireless networks when the wireless carriers are so quick to decommission older networks? Cast our minds back to 2G, I suppose, right now. I'd be keen to hear your thoughts on that, but also within that, I mean, what role do you see 5G playing with other networks? Again, referring to things like DSRC, do you see interoperability there?
Yeah, so I think when you start to look at the evolution of technology, obviously evolution, whether it's the type of car you drive and what's in that car and the capabilities of the car, or a mobile wireless network, the capabilities always have to move to get better and improve. I mean, otherwise we'd be, driving cars from 1987 or something like that. And I use 1987 because that's really when GSM became GSM actually, which you mentioned, became fairly prolific and started to spread across the world. Well, we're in 2017, and then we're 30 years, from 1987, and you still have GSM networks out there. So is it an issue? Well, yeah, it is an issue because technology continues to advance, and cars that want to be connected are going to want more and more advanced capabilities. But again, if you look at even where we are today with LTE, and LTE continues to improve and continues to get better and better, even as people are also working on 5G standards. These technologies are going to be around for decades. So even though LTE is something that everyone has gotten quite used to in the United States because it covers 99% of the Americans, it actually will be a technology that will be around for decades, and yet we are all talking about 5G and the newest thing on the block. So when it comes to like decommissioning equipment, if there's a market for and people are utilizing things, I am a believer in innovation and the fact that mobile wireless operators want that revenue, so they'll find ways to address the upgrade cycle for the car, and that will be something that again would be a good problem to have because it means people are looking for the latest technology.
Okay, brilliant. I suppose, Roger, the same question to you, obviously coming from a Tier 1 aspect. How are you finding having to adapt to the different spectrums that are coming around? Is it a concern for you, or do you see it as innovation and something that enables you to develop more services?
I think from a car maker's perspective, and I don't want to characterize my customers, but I do know a little bit about this. Depending on the value of the application that they see for transportation, like I mentioned before, with the existing or historical networks not having the type of high availability, low latency, and kind of ubiquitous nature, no matter where you are in a vehicle. I think in the past applications where a car maker might use a 2G system, I think will be somewhat overcome by the new capabilities that this new connected society will bring for us. And as I mentioned before, when we talked about automated driving and kind of a new transportation world that's a little bit different than the 1987, like Chris mentioned, we'll see the use cases for connectivity being of more value, and therefore the additional cost necessary to put like the latest kind of network access technology into a vehicle will prove to be a good value based on the application set, or the other things that people will want to do while they're in their car, while they're maybe not even driving their car, while they're just moving from point A to point B. So I don't think it's as much a concern anymore about the decommissioning of older networks. I think that there will be enough value in the new connectivity to warrant kind of staying up to date with the modem that might be placed in your car. You also have the kind of brought in equipment where you can take advantage of that kind of latest and greatest connectivity and still use it for the purposes of augmenting your transportation experience.
Okay, great. Chris, I'm just going to fire a very quick question your way, and then we're going to do our audience poll, which I'll let you gentlemen discuss in a second. So, Chris, just a very quick one then. We had 4.5G Pro and 4.9G announced by network vendors as a play before 5G. What role do you see those playing? Is that going to be a significant disruptor, or?
Well, 5G Americas, we look at those, and those are the 4.5G and 4.9G are really marketing terms for any certain specific vendors at different times, and the competition between vendors. They all start using different things like that. Really, what you're looking at is the evolution of the technology of LTE to what's called LTE Advanced, and then LTE Advanced Pro. And so those, I would say, are excellent possibilities when you start to think about the technology roadmap for connecting everything, including connecting cars. In fact, if you look at the 3GPP standard, it's release 14 that the vehicle to everything standard will be part of. And so that release 14 is going to address vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to network, vehicle to infrastructure, and vehicle to pedestrian as far as the types of use cases in release 14, and that would be considered what's called LTE Advanced Pro. Now, some people might put, again, that's 4.9 or 4.7 or whatever you want LTE, but it's, the true term at standards is LTE Advanced Pro. And are they disruptors? Actually, I don't look at them as disruptors as much as they are, again, part of the story of possibilities for the connected car and all the different things that you can do with the LTE technology as we move to 5G in the future. So I think it's just a great story, and it's a great option, and the standards are very moving forward very quickly to make sure we address this important marketplace.
Fantastic, thank you, Chris. Okay, as mentioned, we'll do our audience poll now. So just bear with us 2 seconds, we'll get that on the screen. So this is obviously for our audience. We're keen to hear your thoughts, and then we'll get Chris and Roger to discuss it. So the question is, where do you see 5G having the biggest impact in the automotive space? The options are infotainment, V2X, autonomous driving, or V2V. So we'll give you guys a couple of seconds to vote on that, and then we'll take a look at the results and get Chris and Roger to cast their thoughts on what you guys think. So we'll give you a couple more seconds. Okay, just count you down from 5 seconds. That's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we've got the results here. I'm sure we can all see them on the screen now, but we can see that actually there seems to be quite a bit of disagreement here. I mean, we all agree that V2V maybe not so much, but infotainment, V2X, and autonomous driving all have pretty much exactly the same ratings on there. So Chris, Roger, I'd be very keen to hear you guys dissect where 5G will fit in these three spheres and also cast your own thoughts on that question as well. I'd be very keen to hear that. So, Roger, if you're good to go, I'd be happy to kick off with you on this one.
Sure. So the idea of connectivity and its impact in I guess in transportation is maybe quite obvious to most people, and that's maybe why you see the V2X and autonomous driving. Um, the 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 nature of a highly automated vehicle needs to have awareness of its surrounding, and you can't do that on a vehicle with four wheels or two wheels or whatever through any kind of cabled communication, but you do need that awareness. And the idea that highly automated driving, where the driver is not required or will not be required to take over the driving task, necessarily needs an awareness at a distance that's farther than than the eye can see, or farther than a radar can see, or farther than a LiDAR or a camera can see. And so the idea of having connectivity be attached with autonomous driving, I think is quite easy to see. In terms of infotainment, maybe that has more to do with society in general and not so much about the vehicle connectivity itself. Although, I mean, I know a lot of people who listen to their Pandora or Netflix as opposed to broadcast media, and so that's where an area where I could see the idea of this highly available and reliable network painting a good picture. I did want to comment a little bit on the V2V itself, since we have a lot of experience in that at my company. That if you think about that as being imminent crash avoidance, I think the technology that the U.S. government has developed and now is intending to deploy as a mandate, I think will be the best solution for that particular use case where you do have imminent crash avoidance. And I think eventually that will end up becoming part of an autonomous driving architecture. So that may be where people did not kind of connect the 5G with the imminent crash avoidance, and that's why you see the lower number there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Roger. Chris, I guess we'll get your review on it as well, but just on the point that Roger spoke about their infotainment side of things, obviously there's a cost associated with wireless connectivity, particularly within the car, and the vehicle-based data subscriptions, they're prohibitively expensive these days. So before you get on that, I'd just like you to comment on when do you think the cost for drivers are going to go down and we can actually see these subscriptions have more uptake?
Well, as a wireless industry associated with antitrust restrictions, we don't really get into the kind of the cost or pricing methodology for any of our companies or anything publicly or privately. So I wouldn't be able to say that. I would say I can say historically, you look at technology evolutions over time, and obviously the cost curve and price curve typically goes down as more and more people want subscriptions or want that type of connectivity. Whether it's, if you look at the price of a example of a smartphone 14 years ago versus the price of a smartphone today, and what's capable in that smartphone today versus 14 years ago. So that's really about the only comment I could say as an industry association. As far as a quick comment, because I think Roger talked through it, on the quick poll about 5G, I think one of the things that I would say is that it's not just about waiting for 5G and what would have the impact. If you look at 5G Americas has done a white paper that we released at the end of 2016, really on really it's basically the vehicle to everything cellular solutions, and it includes really what is going on with the standard right now of LTE. And so I would recommend that your audience, if they're interested, go to our website and at 5G Americas, and you can see download that for free to see kind of our viewpoint of all these areas. But I think the possibilities for 5G as well as LTE are there for having an impact on all these areas. Obviously, there are areas that are already moving forward fairly quickly. So, but again, the impact could be across the scope here.
Great, thank you, Chris. Okay, we'll get back to a few questions, and please say we've got quite a few audience questions, so we will make some time for them towards the end. But I'd like to move on now to one of the things we've actually got on the polls there, V2X. I mean, I suppose just a very straightforward and simple question. We'll go into a bit more detail on it, but ultimately, is 5G a viable technology for V2X? Chris, I'll stick with you for now on this one, and the next one will be coming your way, Roger.
And my answer would be yes. It's a viable technology. It will be something, obviously, that has to be part of the conversation when the automakers, the mobile wireless operators, and even the users who are looking to possibly that are going to be paying for these capabilities. It needs to be in that conversation. If you look at the technology evolution and where we are today and where we're going, LTE provides that kind of that foundation for 5G, so that when you see 5G deployments being made, LTE will be interworking with that. So when you start to think about the coverage that you need for vehicle to everything, and the four components, which would be vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to network, vehicle to infrastructure, and vehicle to pedestrian, then you realize that you need that combination of things. You need LTE and 5G interworking to make sure that when these technologies are rolled out in the automobile, that you have all the types of capabilities that you need.
Okay, and I'd like to come to you now, Roger, on sort of broadening out. Obviously, we've spoken a lot about 5G in respect of the V2X side of things, but is there going to be one standard solution for V2V and V2X, or are there going to be multiple technology solutions utilized in the future? Be very interested to hear your thoughts on this.
I think I may have mentioned this already, I think there's a opportunity for a number of different, access technologies. So I think for a given set of use cases or a set of applications, there may be benefits and detriments from selecting a particular technology, especially if one of the things that we talk about for what we commonly call in the States DSRC or 5.9 DSRC, which is the subject of the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking from the U.S. Department of Transportation, is that the network that will be deployed, whether it's peer-to-peer on vehicle-to-vehicle or an infrastructure, transportation infrastructure to the vehicle, this is a network that was built for transportation and solely for transportation. So there won't be any, I don't think there's any intention to have, infotainment or, movies or audio or, that kind of a thing competing for the access to those channels. It will be for transportation only. The other thing about that network is that it's, because it's not a subscriber-based network, there is no, no dissemination of personally identifiable information. So the privacy associated with that transportation network has a unique aspect that can be used for certain circumstances. However, that being said, not everything that people will want to do or that vehicle manufacturers will want to do can be accomplished by that transportation network only. I mean, we've mentioned infotainment and things like that, and some automated driving characteristics where you have a much longer range where you need to get warned of hazardous conditions in the event that the human operator is not actually driving the vehicle. And so I think there will be an impact in the kind of V2X, so to speak, that the 5G network and all of its attributes about highly available and low latency and massive machine-to-machine connectivity will be relevant for transportation, in addition to the the 5.9 spectrum that the U.S. Department of Transportation has outlined as a kind of a transportation network. So I think both will be relevant for the transportation systems of the future.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much, Roger. Finally, we'll come to the last question I have, and then we're going to get to some of the questions that the audience have been submitting. So I'll start with Chris, and Roger, hand over to you for final comments in this. But finally, are there ways that the auto manufacturers and the technology providers need to work closer together for a sustainable and vibrant V2X marketplace? Chris, as I say, I'll hand over to you, and then Roger, if you'd like to follow up for the final comments.
My comment on that would be that I do think that we need to work closer in almost every way, as far as making sure that when you start to look at technology evolutions, you don't want to be looking at them and developing them without proper input and a cohesive manner of who's going to be utilizing many of the use cases and the necessary technology capabilities. So you want to see, having said that, more information exchange, more input, more discussions between the mobile wireless operators, the mobile wireless vendors, the auto manufacturers, the auto suppliers, and so forth. So I think you're actually, on a positive note, I think you're seeing that. I think at your recent event at CES, you noticed that there was I think a broader audience in that that was interested in the various kind of issues and opportunities in this market. And I think you're seeing that a little bit at what's called the third generation partnership project standards, where you do have various industries that are starting to provide input to the standards process. But I think it's really about coming together and communicating about the needs and the opportunities, so that when it comes to the actual products and services that are coming out, it is a product and services that the consumer is interested in. But I think it's just about communication and doing more in between all the different parties. But I think you're starting to see that, so that's a real positive for the industry, all the industries.
Thank you, Chris. And finally, we'll just hand over to Roger for the closing comment on that question, and then, as I say, we'll get to the audience questions.
Sure. I have to agree with everything that Chris talked about. I think the more kind of vertical markets that you get involved with the concept of a connected society, the more the technology will be appropriate for those applications and use cases, whether it's transportation or entertainment or news and sports and all kinds of things. I think that the kind of the 5G community has taken, I'd say, a more productive approach to that, and has tried to bring in some of these more or less well-served vertical markets like transportation and healthcare, and to see what connectivity and wireless connectivity can actually do to improve society in general. So I'm encouraged by some of the things that I've seen in the industry that tends to start to include more of these somewhat underserved or less well-served vertical markets, and the use of wireless connectivity for them will be beneficial to society in general.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Roger. Okay, that is all the questions I have. So now we'll flip to some of the questions the audience have been coming in. We have got quite a few, so I'm afraid we won't be able to get through all of them, but I'm going to pick a couple that have been coming up quite repeatedly. And sticking with the V2X side of things, quick question, I think this one should come to you, Roger, is how quickly can we anticipate roadside infrastructure to be deployed, and what will that rollout look like?
I think there's been some transportation authorities who are very eager to look at deploying V2X technology. And now that the NPRM has been released, there's no more. There's always this traditional chicken and egg. I don't want to put anything on my roadside if I can't be sure that a good percentage of the vehicles will be similarly equipped. And the other side of the story, well, I don't want to put anything in my car if I'll just listen to I don't know, GM vehicles or something like that. So I think kind of the industry and this kind of section of wireless communications for transportation has kind of finally hit the I don't know the right point where we'll start to see some of these systems deployed. In fact, the Department of Transportation has kind of seeded infrastructure deployment in 3 areas, and we'll be doing more, as far as I understand. 3 areas in New York City, Tampa, and the state of Wyoming, I believe it is, to show and demonstrate and build out infrastructure deployments that will have an impact on these different transportation scenarios. Obviously, urban city driving in New York, kind of arterial, to work and home in Tampa, and then freight and goods transportation in Wyoming. There's also a thing that is maybe not as directly connected to V2X and the deployment of infrastructure, but the Smart City Challenge, which was won by Columbus, includes significant portions of transportation and benefits to society based on enhanced levels of transportation, which in some cases include wireless communications. So I think we're starting to see some of these seed deployments, and I think we'll see a lot more of them. The Smart City Challenge, for example, there was, 7 final cities, and I think each one of those cities is now talking about deploying something. Maybe it's not paid for by the U.S. government, but they have a lot of interest in private companies contributing to a better, a better city, a more connected and a more efficient transportation dynamic within these cities as they continue to gain population.
Fantastic, thank you, Roger. The next one I'm going to fire over to you, Chris. One thing we haven't really touched upon is the regulatory side of the auto tech industry, of course. A lot of attention around that. But is there any concern that regulation around autonomous driving and car connectivity will hold up the implementation of services such as 5G?
I think if you look at many of the, I'll just say this in a general term, if you look at where LTE Advanced Pro and 5G is going and the types of vertical markets that we're looking to address as a technology platform, and some of those include things like transportation, healthcare, education, and even government, and medicine, you find that, these are industries that have lots of regulations. So, are there concerns that there is a lot to be worked out when it comes to regulations at many levels? Is it something that most industries, when you work with a car manufacturer, have they had to deal with this before? Yes, but it is a little bit different when you start thinking about autonomous driving. But is it a concern? It's a concern. Is it something that can definitely be overcome? Most definitely. But it's not just for the 5G technology platform and LTE moving to 5G. It's not just about transportation. Many of the industries that we are addressing in today and in the future, we're seeing that they're very heavily regulated, and so they'll have to be worked with very closely with the government.
Thank you, Chris. We'll do one more each. So the next one is to you, Roger. Obviously, Denso are quite prolific in terms of the work being done on platooning at the moment. So I have a question here that says, how do you see the future of technologies such as LTE or 5G supporting full autonomous applications such as platooning?
Okay. I think depending on the attributes of the 5G technology that you deploy, I think it's technically possible to use peer-to-peer LTE, whatever they call that. I forget what they call that, or what it will be called in the future when it gets deployed. The idea of platooning the necessity of exchanging, vehicle dynamic information to keep things safe will necessitate a kind of a peer-to-peer communication network. I'm not sure the extent to which 5G will use that. From what I've seen, it's a lot of more like a edge connection. So there will be a portion of infrastructure necessary for that, which I think will hurt platooning overall. Most of the kind of platooning you've seen so far has to do with freight transportation and long haul trucking, but I see a case where that could be made for example, the smart city that I mentioned, where you could so-called use a platoon or a grouping of freight transportation through an arterial street and do something similar to a transit preemption to keep freight moving more efficiently on surface streets as well as on long haul trucking over highways. And that's something that I think could be supported through the use of 5G technologies, where there are infrastructure on the transportation roadways pretty well deployed already.
Great, thank you, Roger. And the final question, Chris, I'll submit this to you. Getting back onto 5G, looking for the pros and cons on this question. So will 5G be built into the car or via a docking station for a 5G smartphone? I suppose we're looking for the pros and cons on both options there, Chris. If you could just take a minute or two just to give us a couple of ideas there.
Well, I think it's very early to say, what will happen. Obviously, if it's, some people will like it to be integrated into the car, but if you think about what smartphones are much obviously able to be upgraded much easier as far as the capabilities and the technology, because you can from basically every aspect. So it remains to be seen. I mean, we're very early in the process. I know there's obviously has to be a lot of planning in the process, but when you look at kind of commercial standardized rollouts in 2020 and beyond, even though there are announcements before that, there's time to think through this. Now, when you talk about something that's integrated into the car versus a docking station where you can bring your smartphone in, again, to me, one of the biggest pros of it being a docking station is the upgradability. But I think the industry is finding other ways to upgrade even within the car. So it just remains to be seen. I think those types of decisions really get down to commercial decisions and what is going to be best to meet your customer's needs and what the customer wants. And that will be, again, a combination of, okay, the car manufacturer, the parts supplier that's doing it, as well as the mobile wireless operator. What's the best solution, for not just short term, but medium term and long term? So there's a lot to that question. I think you could have a 20-minute panel just on that.
Brilliant. I appreciate the suggestion as well, Chris. But that really is the end of the webinar at this point. As I say, this webinar has been done in association with the TU-Automotive Detroit event that will be taking place in Novi on June the 7th and 8th. At that event, we'll be expanding a lot more on some of the things we've discussed today. So if you'd like more information, please feel free to drop me an email at jamie@tu-auto.com. But most of all, I'd like to thank our panelists today, Chris and Roger. Thank you both very much. I'm sure our audience would agree. We've had some fantastic insights from you gentlemen today, and I appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you. No problem at all. And a reminder to our audience as well that yes, we will be sending out the full recording of this webinar, so you will be getting that in the next couple of days. But that really is it. Thank you all for listening. Thank you again to our panelists, and that really is it from TU Automotive HQ. We hope to see you soon, and take care. Bye now.
Thank you.